Have you ever imagined driving alone along a deserted road in the middle of a brutal blizzard, when suddenly, an imposing shadow appears in the middle of the path? The heart races, the hands tighten on the steering wheel, and for a moment, everything freezes. Not because of the biting cold, but because of the fear of the unknown. What would you do if you realized that this shadow was not just an obstacle, but a desperate mother bear, staring at your vehicle as if begging for help? That's exactly what happened on a freezing night in Alaska. A truck driver, accustomed to the difficulties of icy roads, saw his trip interrupted by something that seemed unreal. In the middle of the road, with the snow blowing hard, a huge bear remained motionless. His claws dug into the ice, his heavy breathing forming clouds of steam. Something was wrong. Bears generally avoid humans, but this bear, it wasn't there by chance. She needed to be heard. The truck driver tried to honk. Nothing. The headlights flashed. Nothing. The bear didn't even move. But then, when he looked closer, something on the side of the road sent shivers down your spine. Two little cubs were trapped in a frozen ditch, shivering, helpless, on the verge of despair. Nature can be wild, merciless. The biting cold does not forgive the weak, and in those extreme conditions the puppies wouldn't survive for long. But what that mother bear did in that moment defied all the rules of wildlife. In an act of despair and courage, she trusted a human to save your babies. And now, what would this man do? Getting close to a mother bear can be the worst decision of anyone's life. But ignoring those helpless puppies, that too seemed impossible. Time was running out, and every second lost meant a greater risk. The truck driver would need to take the hardest decision of your life, and what happened next was simply unforgettable. And now, faced with that unbelievable scene, what would you do? Would he risk his own safety to help, or would he continue on his journey, ignoring the silent plea of that desperate mother? What happened next was something no one could have predicted, and this story proves that even in the most extreme moments, compassion can change everything. But before continuing, I want to extend a special invitation to you. If you love heartwarming stories of unbelievable rescues, moments when the impossible becomes real, and where the connection between humans and animals defies all expectations, then subscribe to the channel now. Here, you will find stories that touch the heart, that show the most beautiful side of nature, and that prove that empathy can save lives. And don't forget to activate the bell, because the next stories will surprise you even more. Now, stay with me, because what this truck driver did that freezing night will leave you speechless. Winter in Alaska forgives no one. Temperatures can plummet to 40 below, transforming the landscape into an ice cemetery, where only the strongest survive. The roads, covered in snow and black ice, become treacherous traps. For truck drivers who traverse these isolated routes, each journey is a test of endurance, courage, and above all, sort. Mike Henderson, a veteran of icy roads, knew this all too well. He had faced fierce storms, ice cracking under the weight of his truck, and even hungry wolves prowling his nightly stops. But nothing prepared him for what he found that night. Driving in the darkness with the headlights only illuminating a small part of the road ahead, Mike was already accustomed to coming across animal silhouettes in the distance. Moose, wolves, even bears crossed the roads looking for shelter or food. But that it wasn't an ordinary night. Something was different. A huge shadow appeared in the middle of the road, motionless, imposing. The truck's engine roared loudly, but that dark figure didn't move even an inch. Mike frowned. It was a bear. No, it was something more than that. It was a mother bear. He immediately recognized her stance, strong but restless. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, as if she were agitated, desperate. Mike slowed down and stopped a few meters away. Bears rarely face trucks head-on. Something was very wrong. He honked. No reaction. He flashed his headlights, waiting for her to back away. Nothing. The bear stood firm, like a wall of flesh and fur, staring at the vehicle with her dark, penetrating eyes. That's when Mike noticed movement on the side of the road. He leaned on the steering wheel, squinting to see better. And then, the shock hit him like a punch in the chest. Two little bear cubs were trapped in a frozen ditch, shivering from the cold, unable to get out. The mother bear blocked the way because I didn't know what else to do. She'd already tried it herself. Mike could see the marks of her claws in the ice, the broken pieces around the ditch. But nothing worked. Her babies were defenseless, and she, the most powerful creature in that icy forest, I couldn't save them alone. Mike felt a lump in his throat. He had seen many things on the roads, but this was different. And now, what would he do? Getting close to a mother bear was suicide. Anyone who knew a little about wildlife knew that a mother protects her cubs at any cost. Even without meaning to, Mike could be seen as a threat. And then, in a split second, everything could end badly. But what if he did nothing? The wind was howling outside, blowing snow against the windshield. The puppies were increasingly weak, their small bodies trembling almost imperceptibly. If he just waited, if he continued on his way and pretended he didn't see, what would happen? Mike tightened his grip on the steering wheel, feeling the decision weigh heavily on his shoulders. He was not a hero. He was just a truck driver trying to do his job. But that night on that road, he was those puppies' only chance. And before I continue this unbelievable story, I need to ask you, what would you do in this situation? Would you risk your life to save these puppies, or would you continue on your journey, letting fate do its thing? Right here in the comments, I really want to know your opinion. And if you like heartwarming stories like this, moments where survival instinct clashes with compassion, so subscribe to the channel now. Here, we bring you unbelievable stories from the animal world, heroic rescues, and connections that challenge everything we know about nature. So activate the bell and stay with us, because what happens next in this story will leave you speechless. The silence of that freezing night was interrupted only by the roaring engine and the sound of snow being blown by the sharp wind. Mike was still inside the truck, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly, his heart hammering inside his chest. The mother bear remained motionless, your eyes fixed on him as if trying to communicate in some way. But with what? What did she want? Mike tried again. He honked. Nothing. He flashed his headlights, hoping the bright light would scare her. But the bear didn't move. On the contrary, she seemed even more determined to remain there, blocking the path. Most wild animals would flee at the slightest sign of a vehicle, especially a large truck. But this bear, it wasn't there by chance. Something was holding her back, something much stronger than fear. Adrenaline began to rush through Mike's body. He needed to understand what was happening. But what could you do? Get out of the truck and risk an attack? Stay in there and wait for the bear to decide to come out? Neither option seemed good. That's when he noticed something strange. The bear wasn't just standing still. She moved from side to side, taking small steps, lifting the front paws and lowering them back onto the ice. She was impatient, but impatient why? Mike looked around. The faint moonlight reflected off the ice and snow accumulated on the side of the road. He strained his eyes to see through the darkness. It was then that his blood ran cold. There was something there, something small, something that shook. Mike leaned forward a little in the seat, not believing what he was seeing. Two little bear cubs were trapped in a deep ditch of snow and ice. Their bodies barely moved, as if the strength was slowly leaving them. And it was at that moment that everything made sense. The mother bear wasn't blocking the road to attack Mike. She was there to protect her cubs, or maybe even to ask for help. He felt a lump in his throat. What must that bear be going through? The despair of seeing your babies defenseless, fighting against the deadly cold, unable to do anything. He saw claw marks around the ditch. She tried it alone, tried to dig, tried to pull them up, but the ice was treacherous, and with each attempt the situation seemed to get worse. Now, everything depended on him. Mike took a deep breath. I couldn't just leave. Not after seeing this. But also, I couldn't get out of the truck anyway. If he made a false step, if he made any move that his mother interpreted as a threat, it could be your end. The bear looked back at him. She didn't growl. She didn't advance. Just waited. Mike grabbed his flashlight and shined the light on the puppies. The heart sank even more. They were exhausted. Small, fragile, breathing with difficulty. If I didn't do something now, perhaps there would be nothing more to be done. Time was running against them. Alaska's cold doesn't forgive anyone. Mike knew he couldn't approach it directly. If he got out of the truck and went to the cubs at once, the mother bear might attack. He needed to earn her trust. But how? He remembered a documentary he once watched about bear behavior in the wild. They communicate a lot through their looks, their gestures, the way they move. If he were slow, if he demonstrated that did not pose a danger, maybe, just maybe, the bear wouldn't react aggressively. So, with no other options, Mike made a decision. He opened the truck door very slowly. Every move was calculated. He put one foot out, then the other. He felt the freezing air cut into his skin, but that didn't matter now. The mother bear watched him closely. He raised his hands, showing that he had no weapon. "It's okay, girl," he murmured, even though he knew she couldn't understand him. But maybe, just maybe, she'd feel the intention behind his words. Mike took a small step forward. The bear did not retreat. She also did not attack. That was a good sign. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he walked slowly forward, stopping every couple of steps to gauge her reaction. The bear remained motionless. But Mike noticed something new in her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was despair. It was the look of a mother who I no longer knew what to do. Mike felt a shiver run down his spine. He was about to do something he never imagined he would do in his life. But there was no turning back. The cubs were just a few meters away, trapped in the ice, fighting to survive. Time was against them. And now, it all depended on Mike Henderson. And now I want to hear from you. What would you have done at that moment? Would you have gotten out of the truck? Would you have waited? Or would I have continued on my journey? Write here in the comments what your choice would be. I want to see who would really have the courage to face this challenge. Comment below, "I would help," or "I would continue traveling." And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, this is the moment. Here, you will find real stories of courage, overcoming, and exciting rescues that defy the impossible. Activate the bell so you don't miss what happens next in this story, because what comes now will leave you speechless. The biting Alaskan wind was blowing hard, kicking up little swirls of snow that danced on the frozen asphalt. The silence was frightening. The only thing Mike could hear, besides the howl of the wind, was the sound of his own breathing, accelerated, irregular. He felt his heart pounding against his chest, the blood pulsing in his temples. What he was about to do could be the worst decision of his life, but he knew he couldn't just ignore the scene before him. The mother bear was still motionless, her eyes fixed on him, large, dark, filled with a silent plea. It was strange to think that such a powerful animal, a feared predator, was there, standing still without showing aggression, without trying to drive it away. Mike noticed something that sent a shiver up his spine. She wasn't trying to attack him. She was trying to communicate. He took another step forward, feeling the icy ground creak beneath his boots. His eyes scanned the road, trying to better understand what was happening. It was then that he saw it. Among the broken sheets of ice, something moved. Mike blinked a few times, trying to see better in the darkness. The moon's dim light reflected off the snow, creating diffuse shadows. But there was no doubt. There was something alive there. Something small. Something that shook. His heart raced. And then he saw it. Two little bear cubs were trapped in a deep trench of ice and snow. The white fur stained with hardened snow, the small bodies shaking violently. His eyes were wide, scared, but he no longer had the strength to even cry. They were at their limit. If Mike had driven down that road just a few minutes later, it might already have been too late. He swallowed hard. Now everything made sense. The mother bear didn't block the road by chance. She was there because I had no more options. She tried. Mike could see the claw marks around the ditch, the broken patches of ice, the disturbed drifts of snow. She had done everything she could to get her babies out of there, but the ice was too thick, the ditch was too deep, and she was alone. Until now. Mike felt a huge weight fall on his shoulders. He was those cubs' only hope. But how? How could he help without becoming a threat to his mother? If he tried anything wrong, any sudden movement, she could attack him. He looked at the cubs again. Time was running out. They were getting weaker and weaker. Small tremors ran through their bodies, but their eyes were starting to close. They were giving up. Mike needed to act, and he needed to act now. Taking a deep breath, he kept his hands visible and slowly began to lower himself, trying to demonstrate that he was not a danger. The bear followed his every movement carefully. Her claws dug into the ice, her body tensed as if ready to react. But she didn't attack. That was a sign. Mike took his flashlight out of his pocket and shined the light into the ditch. The puppies barely reacted. They were too weak to run away, too weak to even attempt to climb. Mike felt his chest tighten. There was no time to waste. His gaze returned to the mother bear, still motionless. He knew he was treading dangerous territory, but at that moment, there was no choice. He stood up slowly, without taking his eyes off her, and walked a few steps back to his truck. The cold burned your skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was only focused on one thing: save those puppies. He opened the side of the truck where he was carrying some emergency equipment: a rope, a shovel, a thermal blanket. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Taking the items, he closed the door without making a sound and returned to the ditch. Now the hardest part would begin. He needed to get to the cubs without scaring them. He needed to dig without appearing to be a threat to his mother. And above all, he needed to remain calm. The snow crunched beneath his feet as he approached the ditch. He saw one of the cubs try to move, but its paws slipped on the ice. He no longer had the strength to get up. Time was running out. Mike threw the rope over his shoulder and knelt beside the ditch. The cold penetrated his clothes, but he didn't care. Carefully, he began to use the shovel to remove the ice around the cubs. Every movement was precise, calculated. He couldn't scare them, couldn't make them even weaker. The mother bear stepped forward. Mike felt his heart almost stop. But he didn't growl. She did not attack. He stood there watching. It was as if she knew I was trying to help. Mike picked up the pace. Every second was precious. The snow was harder than he imagined, but he continued. He couldn't fail. After a few minutes, he finally managed to create a small space around the cubs. But there was still a problem. He couldn't just take them. If he touched them and his mother reacted badly, that would be the end. So he did the only thing that came to mind. With slow movements, he took the thermal blanket from his backpack and spread it over the ice, leaving half of it in the trench. Then he took a few steps back, staying low. Now it was up to them. The puppies, feeling the new material under their paws, began to react. The warmth of the blanket encouraged them to move. One of them tried to climb up but slipped. The other did the same. It was then that something unbelievable happened. The mother bear, who before just watched, now moved. She walked slowly to the place and he stretched his paw toward the cubs. Mike stood still, not believing what I was seeing. A bear started pulling the puppies, using what little strength he still had. She encouraged them to climb, helped them with small pushes. Mike felt his heart speed up. That was the decisive moment. He held tight to the rope and with a quick and precise movement threw one end into the ditch. The cubs tried to cling to her, their small bodies shaking with the effort. The bear growled softly, but it wasn't a threatening growl. It was as if she encouraged the puppies to try one more time. The first cub managed to pull its little body up, supporting itself on the blanket and the disturbed snow. He was almost there. The second, however, he was still trapped. Mike felt a lump in his throat. He needed to act, and I needed to act now. The cold was getting worse, the storm was approaching. The ice began to crack beneath his feet. And at that moment, Mike knew that there was no turning back. Now everything depended on him. And now I want to hear from you. What do you think happens next? Will Mike be able to save the second cub before it's too late? Write in the comments, he'll make it. whether you believe in rescue, or it will be risky if you think something could go wrong. I want to know your opinion, and if you're not signed up yet, now is the time. Activate the bell because the next part of this story will leave you speechless. The ice crunched beneath Mike's feet, a barely perceptible sound amid the howling wind that blew like a dark lament across the frozen Alaskan plains. His fingers were numb, even inside the thick gloves, and each breath was a small struggle against the biting cold. But none of that mattered. None of this compared to what he was facing at that moment. The dilemma was clear. If he didn't do something now, those cubs wouldn't survive. Mike stared at the mother bear, his dark eyes reflecting what little moonlight made it through the heavy clouds. She was still, but her posture said it all. She was alert. Its claws were dug into the ice, muscles tense, ready to react to the slightest suspicious movement. At any moment, she could attack. He swallowed hard. Approaching a mother bear in the wild is a death sentence. Everyone knows that. They are fierce, protective, unpredictable. One mistake, one false step, and it would all end there, on that forgotten road, where no one would ever find his body. But there was also no way to simply ignore what was happening. The cubs were trapped, helpless, exhausted. If he left, they wouldn't see the sunrise. Mike felt every fiber of his being screaming that this was an absurd idea, that he should get in the truck, back it up, and get out of there as quickly as possible. But something inside him just didn't allow it. He looked at the cubs again. The first was almost out of the ditch, its small body shaking uncontrollably, but the second was still in prison. Deeper, weaker. He couldn't even move. His eyes, small and innocent, seemed half closed, as if he was already accepting the fate that the merciless cold had in store for him. Mike clenched his fists. No, he wouldn't let that happen. But how? How could he act without provoking his mother's fury? How to approach without seeming like a threat? Time was against him. The ice beneath his feet crunched again. Small cracks were beginning to appear around the ditch. The cold was getting worse, and that meant the ice structure was weakening. If it took any longer, everything could collapse at once, burying the cubs alive. Mike knew he needed to act quickly, but every fiber in his body warned of the mortal risk he was taking. Just being there was dangerous. If he took one wrong step, if the mother bear decided he was too close, there would be no time for regrets. The mother bear stirred. A single step, an almost imperceptible change of position. A warning. She was watching everything, measuring his every move, trying to understand your intentions. The truck driver took a deep breath. His instincts screamed that the only chance was to show that he was not an enemy. Slowly, he knelt down. Not abruptly, not quickly, gently. He kept his posture open without shrinking, without showing fear. It was a risky bet. But in nature, many animals interpret slow, calculated movement as less threatening. The bear growled softly, a low sound that echoed on the empty road. It wasn't an attacking growl, but a warning growl. One last warning. Mike didn't back down. He picked up the rope he had thrown in the snow and, with extreme calm, threw the end into the ditch, close to the second cub. Not abruptly, but careful, as if offering a path instead of imposing a solution. The little bear didn't react. He was too weak. Mike felt the urgency rising within him. If he waited any longer, it would be too late. Then he did something he himself never imagined doing. He looked straight into the mother bear's eyes and, in the lowest, most controlled voice he could muster, he spoke. "You need to trust me. I just want to help." The words dissipated into the freezing air, and Mike didn't expect her to understand. But maybe she could feel it. The bear didn't growl back. She just watched. He began to slowly pull the rope, trying to wrap the puppy around it without having to touch it directly. If I could pull him close to the edge, maybe he could grab hold and climb up. The puppy tried to react, but it was weak. Too weak. Mike looked back at the mother bear, and that's when something unbelievable happened. The big bear, who had just been watching before, took a step forward, then another. His gaze alternated between the puppy and Mike, as if he was assessing the situation. And then, with a careful movement, She herself began to pull the cub with her nose. Mike felt his breathing hitch. He never imagined he would see something like this. The mother bear was helping. She was accepting his presence. It was now or never. Mike, still cautious, adjusted the rope around the cub and pulled tighter. The little one tried to react. He moved a little more, slipped, but managed to catch himself on the upturned snow. He was almost there. Mike's heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his own ear. The ice crackled again, but now it was different. It wasn't the sound of something far away. It was right there, beneath them. Mike felt the crack run across the floor like an invisible snake. A fracture in the ice, spreading rapidly. The mother bear noticed too. His ears pricked up, his body tensed even more. They had seconds to save that puppy before everything fell apart. Mike pulled on the rope with all the strength he had. The cub tried to get up, supporting itself with its small claws, and then finally got it. But the ice could no longer hold. A larger crack opened beneath Mike's feet. He felt the ground shake, felt the cold rise through his boots as the snow began to give way. I needed to get out of there immediately. The mother bear, sensing danger, grabbed her cubs by the scruff of the neck and ran to the side of the road. Mike threw himself back at the last second, escaping the collapse of the ditch by the skin of his teeth. The ice fell, swallowing the space where the cubs had been just seconds before. The sound of cracking ice echoed through the night. And then, silence. Mike dropped to his knees, panting, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He did it. Against all odds, he did it. But would the mother bear recognize this? Could it be that now, with the puppies safe, would she still see him as an ally or a threat? The truck driver looked at her again, not knowing what to expect. And now I want to hear from you. If you were in Mike's shoes, would you have the courage to approach a mother bear in this situation? Comment below. I would help if you think you would do the same, or it would be risky. It is believed that the danger would be too great. And if this story has already held you back, leave your like now. This helps the channel a lot and shows that you want more exciting stories like this. Don't leave without enjoying it. And stay tuned because what happens next will leave you speechless. Time seemed to compress around Mike, every second becoming a crushing weight on his shoulders. The cold punished his hands, even with the thick gloves, and his breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. But he couldn't think about that now. All that mattered was what was in front of him. 2 bear cubs trapped in the frozen ditch, shivering, helpless, fighting to survive. The first one was almost gone. He clung to the edge with his little claws, trying to find the strength to climb, but he was too fragile. The second, however, was motionless, small, vulnerable, covered in a thin layer of ice that made its fur shine in the moonlight. If Mike took another minute, there might not be any more time. The mother bear was nearby, her immense body appearing even larger in the darkness. She growled, a low sound that reverberated in Mike's chest but did not advance. It was as if she knew he was trying to help, but still, the protective instinct made her hesitate. Mike kept his posture low, avoiding any sudden movements. He knew that his every action could be interpreted as a threat. It was a game of trust, a tenuous balance between fear and hope. With a calculated movement, he threw the end of the rope into the ditch, trying to position it so that the first calf could gain support. But the snow was too soft, and the rope just sank. He would need more strength, more precision. Grabbing the emergency shovel he carried in the truck, he began digging around the edge of the ditch, trying to create a smoother path for the cubs to climb. Every movement was closely monitored by the mother, her dark eyes shining in the reflection of the snow. The first cub tried once more. He dragged his front paws out, forcing himself against the ice with everything he had. Mike held the rope tightly and pulled, feeling the weight of the small body fighting against gravity. And then, he did it. The first cub slithered upwards, its shaky legs barely able to support it. But he was out. He was saved. The mother stepped forward, sniffing her baby, licking its fur as if making sure it was still there, still alive. Mike felt momentary relief, but he couldn't stop. The second cub was still trapped, and he didn't move. Mike turned his eyes down into the ditch, his heart sinking as he saw the small body huddled against the ice. He was smaller than the first, more fragile. Time was running out for him. Without thinking twice, Mike picked up the shovel and went back to digging, trying to remove as much snow as possible from around the pup. But with each excavation, the situation became more dangerous. The ice beneath his feet began to creak. The sound echoed across the empty road, a deep crack that made Mike's stomach turn. The structure was giving way. He no longer had time to be careful. He needed to act, and he needed to act now. Leaning down, Mike reached into the ditch. It was crazy. If his mother interpreted this as an aggressive gesture, he would not have a chance to defend himself. But there was no other option. Either he tried, or that puppy would die. With a firm pull, he grabbed the cub by the skin of its neck, the same way its mother would carry it. The little one didn't react. His body was cold, still. The ice cracked again, and this time, Mike felt the floor sink a few millimeters. He pulled harder. Nothing. The cub was trapped in a piece of hardened ice. If he didn't let go of that, he wouldn't get out of there. Mike, now breathing rapidly, picked up the shovel again and hit the ice around the small body hard. The structure shook, small cracks spreading to the sides. He was about to collapse. The mother bear growled again. This time, louder. Mike froze. What would she do? He was too close to the cub. But then something unexpected happened. She didn't move forward. On the contrary, she bent down. With a smooth movement, the big bear stretched her snout into the ditch, trying to reach the cub in her own way. It was the confirmation Mike needed. She was trusting him. He redoubled his efforts, striking the ice with surgical precision, gradually breaking the layers that kept the cub trapped. Each knock made the floor creak even more, threatening to collapse at any moment. But he couldn't stop now. With one last blow, the ice gave way. Mike let go of the shovel, grabbed the cub, and pulled him up with all his strength. The small body slid across the ice and fell onto the snow, still shivering. He did it. The second cub was out. But there was no time to celebrate. The ice, already fragile, couldn't take it anymore. Mike felt everything crumble beneath his feet. The ditch where the puppies were seconds before simply disappeared, collapsing into a deep, dark hole. If he had waited one more second, they would have been swallowed. Mike fell backwards into the snow, panting. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and for a moment he just lay there, looking up at the dark sky, trying to process everything. The sound of the wind was the only thing that filled the silence. Then something touched his arm. He turned quickly, his instinct ready to react. But it wasn't the mother bear. It was the puppy. The little one, still trembling, had crawled towards him. His weak paws barely supported his body, but he looked at Mike with those dark eyes, full of something difficult to describe. And then the mother approached. Mike felt the tension return. He was helpless, lying on the ground, vulnerable. She could attack now. She could decide that the danger is past and that now he was no longer needed. But that's not what happened. The big bear looked at the cubs. They were saved. She looked at Mike, and then she simply turned and started walking away. The cubs, still fragile, hesitated for a second before following her, stumbling through the snow, but alive. Mike stood there, watching, unable to say a word. He would never forget that night. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals recognize when someone is trying to help them? Write in the comments, animals understand, if you think they feel gratitude or it's just instinct. It is believed that all of this was just survival. And if this story moved you, now is the time to leave your like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that more people can discover incredible stories like this. Don't forget to like. And get ready, because what happens after tonight will surprise you even more. The wind cut Mike's skin like invisible razors. His breath came in white clouds, heavier and heavier, faster and faster. The second cub was almost out. There was little left, so little. But at the same time, it seemed impossible. The bear's small body was stiff from the cold. Its movements were weak, almost non-existent. Every second counted. Mike dug his feet into the ice, using all the strength he had left in his tired muscles. He needed to pull. I needed to get that puppy back before it was too late. The ditch had given way, the ice was cracking everywhere, and he knew he wouldn't get a second chance. The mother bear watched his every move. His dark eyes didn't blink. Did she trust him? Or were you just waiting for the right moment to react? Mike couldn't say. He felt the weight of that gaze burning the back of his neck. He felt the tension in the air, but I couldn't stop. With one last tug, the little cub slid out. Mike fell to his knees in the snow, panting, his chest rising and falling in a frantic rhythm. He didn't know if it was from the cold, the exhaustion, or the sheer terror of being so close to that mother bear without knowing how she would react now. He had done his part, but what now? The puppy was shaking. His eyes were barely open. He was there, outside the ditch, but he was still struggling to stay conscious. The cold was merciless, stealing the heat from her small body, draining her energy with each passing second. Mike instinctively pulled out the thermal blanket he carried with him, and, without thinking twice, began to wrap the puppy in it. If he didn't warm up soon, the rescue would have been in vain. The mother bear growled low, and Mike felt his heart almost stop. What was he doing? He was touching her puppy. This was a clear violation of her space. It could be interpreted as a threat. But when he looked at the great bear again, he noticed that she was not moving forward. She just watched. It was like she understood. That didn't make sense. That wasn't how nature worked. A human and a bear shouldn't share this kind of moment. But there they were, and then something unbelievable happened. The mother bear, immense, frightening, wild, approached. Mike didn't move. He knew that if he tried to run away, she might take it as a sign of weakness. If he ran, he would die. The puppy, still wrapped in the blanket, tried to make a small sound, a faint moan, almost like a call. And the mother bear, he responded. She lowered her head and he sniffed his cub's small body. The heat from her nose formed little clouds of steam in the freezing air. She analyzed him. It smelled. Mike felt his breath catch when he saw that. Instead of pushing the cub away at once, she pushed him lightly with her nose. She was testing if he still had strength. And then, with the most delicate movement Mike has ever seen such a large animal make, the bear caught the cub in her mouth, gently lifting it by the scruff of its neck, as if picking up a fragile piece of its own soul. Mike felt his chest tighten. He knew that bears could feel love for their cubs, but seeing it so close up, after everything that had happened, was surreal. The first cub, which had already been rescued before, tried to approach its mother, still trembling, but more stable than its brother. The family was together again. The mother bear looked up at Mike. It was a different look this time. He wasn't aggressive. It wasn't threatening. It was something deeper. Something Mike could never explain in words. The silence that took over the road seemed eternal. It was as if everything had stopped. The snow was still falling, the wind was still whistling, but none of that mattered. Mike and the mother bear were there, just the two of them. And at that moment, he knew. She knew. She knew he helped. Perhaps animals did not understand the concept of gratitude in the same way as humans, but in that moment, in that look exchanged between a man and a wild beast, there was something. A recognition. An acceptance. The mother bear, still holding her fragile cub between her teeth, turned around. She began walking away, her heavy steps leaving deep marks in the snow. The first cub followed close behind, still staggering a little but steady. The second was held in his mouth. They were leaving. Mike's adrenaline finally began to give way, and he realized his hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the shock. He had just done something that few in the world could say they had done. He saved 2 bear cubs, and his mother let him live to tell this story. Nature has incredible ways of showing us that the connection between living beings goes far beyond what we imagine. This story made us feel the strength of instinct, the power of the bond between mother and puppies, and above all, the surprise of seeing a unique moment happen before our eyes. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals can recognize when someone helps them? Comment here. Animals recognize if you think they feel gratitude or it was just instinct. It is believed that it was just a natural reflex. I want to see your opinion in the comments, and if this story has already captivated you so far, leave a like now. This helps the channel grow and allows more people to be moved by incredible moments like this. And there's more. Sign up and activate the bell because what happens after that will surprise you even more. Click now on the next video and discover another exciting story you can't miss. The snow continued to fall in dense flakes, slowly covering the marks on the frozen road. The wind howled through the trees, a constant sound that filled the silence that had formed after that unbelievable moment. Mike was still kneeling on the ground, his heart racing in his chest, feeling the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He could hardly believe what had just happened. Before him, the mother bear remained motionless, holding her cub between her teeth. The other, still trembling, tried to remain standing next to her. Small, fragile, but alive. They were alive. The big bear lowered her snout and gently touched the rescued cub, who made a small sound, almost a moan. But this time it was not a sound of despair. It was a calling. The mother sniffed him for a long time, as if checking every detail, making sure he was still there, that he had really come back to her. Mike's eyes locked on that moment, and something inside him stirred. He had never seen anything like it before. He had heard stories about how some wild animals seemed to recognize those who helped them, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. The way the mother bear acted wasn't just instinct. There was something more. Mike felt a lump in his throat. He was not facing a mindless beast. I was in front of a mother who almost lost her babies to the deadly Alaskan cold, but who, against all expectations, was given a second chance. And then, she raised her eyes and looked directly at him. It was a look that passed through Mike like an electric current. It wasn't a predator's look. It wasn't a threatening look. It was a deep look. A look that seemed to carry enormous weight, as if somehow she understood what he had done. Mike couldn't move. He knew that anyone in his place would. I would have already retreated. I would have already run back to the truck. I would have tried to escape before it was too late. But something trapped him there. That look. There was something there. Something that words could never completely describe. The bear remained like that for a few moments that seemed like an eternity, just looking at him. Mike felt his chest tighten. Would it be possible? Was it possible that this huge, wild animal which could tear him apart in seconds was actually acknowledging his help? He didn't know. Maybe it was crazy to think that way. Maybe it was just projection. But he felt it. The puppies were alive because of him, and the mother bear knew it. Slowly, very slowly, Mike began to back away. He didn't want to test the bear's patience. He had done enough. He had risked enough. It was time to get out of there before she changed her mind. But when he took the first step back, the bear did not move. She just stayed there, looking at him. The puppies were safe. They were together again. And even then, she didn't immediately turn to leave. Mike felt a shiver run down his spine. What did that mean? If it had been any other bear, it would have already fled into the forest, carrying its cubs to safety, as far away from that strange human as possible. But no, she was still there, observing, recognizing. Snow piled up on Mike's shoulders as he tried to understand what was happening. He felt something different inside him, something you've never felt before. He was no longer just a truck driver stuck in a storm in Alaska. He had been part of something bigger, something most people would never experience. A real connection, not between a man and a wild animal, but between two living beings, between two creatures that, even separated by millions of years of evolution, they managed to understand each other for a brief moment in time. The mother bear took a deep breath, as if processing it all, and finally looked away. She sniffed the puppies once more, making sure they were both okay. Then, finally, he started to walk away. Mike let out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. That was it. She was leaving. He watched as the bear's enormous silhouette began to get lost in the snowy haze. The puppies tried to keep up, still stumbling a little, still fragile. but alive. They were alive. And then, before disappearing completely into the darkness of the forest, the mother bear did something that made Mike's heart stop for a second. She turned around. One last look. Just for a moment. Just enough to make Mike sure that that hadn't been an accident. Just enough to let him know that somehow, that moment would forever be marked in both of their lives. The bear turned again and disappeared into the trees, carrying her cubs away. Mike stood there, not knowing how long it took before he was finally able to move. He would never forget that night. Do you think animals can feel gratitude? Do you believe this mother bear actually recognized Mike's help? Or was it all just survival instinct? Write in the comments. Animals feel gratitude if you believe in this connection. Or it was just instinct if you think it was all just a coincidence of nature. The mother bear's silhouette slowly disappeared into the icy fog, her heavy footsteps leaving deep footprints in the soft snow. The two cubs followed closely behind her, still trembling, but alive, small against the vastness of Alaska, fragile in the face of the deadly cold that enveloped them. But they were no longer alone. They were with her. And she knew that somehow, at that moment, she had helped to make this possible. Mike remained still, his breath coming out in little white vapors in the freezing air. He couldn't move. Not yet. Her eyes followed the bear's every step, as if her brain was still trying to process what had happened. Was it all real? Had he really helped a mother bear save her cubs? Had he really seen in her eyes something that seemed like recognition? Mike's mind was full of questions, but his heart was flooded with something even bigger, an inexplicable feeling of connection with that wild creature. A connection that, until a few hours ago, he would never have thought possible. The mother bear paused for a brief moment before disappearing into the shadows of the snow-covered trees. Mike held his breath, and then she did something he would never forget. She turned around, just for a moment, just enough for your eyes to meet his one last time. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was real. And in that moment, Mike knew. I knew she understood. Maybe bears don't know the word gratitude the way humans do. But Mike didn't need words. That final look was everything. She then continued on her way, disappearing into the trees, taking her two cubs with her. The snow continued to fall, slowly erasing the footprints left by them, as if the forest wanted to save that moment only for those who lived it. Mike lay there for long minutes, his body still frozen, not from the cold, but from the impact of what had just happened. That night would change his life forever. He looked down at his hands, still shaking, still holding the rope used in the rescue. His mind went back to every detail, the cracking ice, the fear of the mother's reaction, the weight of the cub in his arms, the way he almost couldn't pull it out. Every second of that night felt like it was written by something bigger than him. Mike always believed that nature was wild, cruel, a place where only the strongest survive. But that night, he learned that there was something even more powerful than the survival instinct, the love. The love of a mother who defied her own fear of humans to protect her cubs. The love of two little bears who trusted him when they needed him most. And his love, which didn't allow him to turn his back on those defenseless beings. He never thought a bear could trust him. But that night something happened, something he couldn't explain. The truck's radio crackled, bringing him back to reality. He was still in the middle of the deserted road, in the absolute cold, in the silence broken only by the wind. But he was no longer the same man who stood there that night. Mike finally stood up, his body heavy, exhausted. He walked slowly to his truck, each step sinking into the snow. As he opened the door, he felt the heat of the still-running engine envelop his frozen skin. But before entering, he looked once more at the forest. The mother bear was already gone, but what she left in him would never disappear. Nature always surprises us with connections that go far beyond what we imagine. This story made us feel something unique. A moment when, in the middle of the ice, two completely different species trusted each other. But was that just instinct? Or do animals really recognize when someone helps them? Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the mother bear understood that Mike helped her? Comment below. Animals understand if you believe they can feel gratitude or it was just instinct. If you think it was all just a natural survival response. I really want to know your opinion. If this story moved you, show that you are part of this community passionate about incredible stories. Leave your like now. This helps the channel grow and makes more people aware of moments like this, where the impossible becomes real. And believe, what did you see here? It was just the beginning. Here on the channel, each video features unbelievable rescues and connections that challenge everything we know about animals. So don't waste time. Sign up now and activate the bell so you don't miss any of the next exciting stories. And before leaving, I have a challenge for you. The next video is already appearing on the screen, and if this story grabbed you, the next one will leave you speechless. Something unbelievable has happened and you need to see it for yourself. Click now and find out.